Discussion is legitimate, but this is kind of a phony debate. Look at the Israelis. They have, on more than 25 occasions in recent decades, engaged in these prisoner exchanges that have led to the release of terrorists. In many cases, they will, for 5 or 6 Israeli prisoners, they'll trade dozens of Arab prisoners.
All right, that, in my view, is neither here nor there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. It's panel time, and joining us is the co-host of Steele and Ungar on XM Sirius Radio, Rick Ungar, and Grace Marie Turner, the founder of the Galen Institute. Hello to both of you.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, hello.
All right, let's start with the news. The New York Times reporting now that sometime after midnight on June 30th, back in '09, Sergeant Bergdahl left behind a note in his tent saying he had become disillusioned with the Army. He did not support the American mission in Afghanistan, and that he was leaving to start a new life. He then slipped off to out of the outpost and he took with him a soft backpack, water, knives, a notebook, writing materials, left behind his body armor, his weapons. Yet, Rick, Susan Rice told us that he was captured on the battlefield.
Well, he may have been captured on the battlefield. That just means that maybe he wasn't being a participant on the battlefield at the time. Look, this is going to turn into one of the strangest stories that any of us have ever seen. Follow this through to the logical conclusion. Clearly, there is more than enough evidence at this point, or so it would appear, to subject this guy to a court-martial. It seems pretty clear from what we've seen that he deserted. If he is subjected to a court-martial and he's convicted, do you know what's supposed to happen to him?
Firing squad.
Firing squad. This is just a remarkably unbelievable story.
Well, I want to get to that in a second. The U.S. News out with a story about the firing squad in just a second. But Grace Marie, I don't want to concentrate on Susan Rice necessarily, but the whole storyline, again, being put out by the administration when they had to know everything we know now because they've been negotiating with this guy's release for 4 years. Of course they knew everything we're finding out and more, yet they portrayed this as prisoner of war, guy who was captured on the battlefield, great hero. What's going through their minds?
That they think we are idiots, you have to wonder, because certainly they knew that you just dig one layer down in this story and you start to find this stinks to high heaven. And you have to wonder, Steve, was this an effort to throw up yet another dust storm to try to distract people from focusing on the scandal in the VA, which was self-created a distraction from Obamacare and from Benghazi and from the IRS scandal? This one has backfired big time.
Well, except that this would have begun before the VA scandal even broke.
I understand.
Look, I have to be honest. I'm not in the mood.
The timing of when they decided
I'm saying
to.
The negotiations would have had to have started before that. But look, I'm not in the mood to defend the administration on this. I'm really not. I think this whole thing is crazy. I do think, though, you have to be a little bit careful in terms of identifying what the real issues are here. I honestly don't know the answer to whether or not we have an obligation to rescue somebody who is still a member of the armed forces, even if they deserted, when they're being held captive. I don't know the answer to that. It is a subtle question that I can't answer. I understand the emotional trigger of why would we send 6 guys after him who were killed? Why would we go to this trouble of releasing 5 high-value terrorists for a guy who looks like he might turn out to be a deserter? I get the problems, but it is incredibly subtle. Are you supposed to weigh all of that against, well, this is a guy you choose to leave behind because we've decided without giving him the benefit of a court-martial that he's a bad guy? Can understand why you feel that way, but that's not really the way we're supposed to do things.
But Grace Marie, there's other ways and other options to try to get him released. We've been negotiating with the Taliban for 4 years. Leon Panetta, when he was defense secretary, said absolutely not. No part of this. And Obama claimed today that he did talk to Congress. We talked to Congress 3 years ago, according to Mike Rogers today. And then both Democrats and Republicans who were talked to all said to the administration, don't do it.
I think that there are just so many questions. And fortunately, he now is in basically military custody, and we are going to be able to get to the bottom of this, ask him questions, put together all of the evidence that's coming out in a million newspaper reports now, so that we can find out what happened and what his true sentiments were. And if, in fact, he did desert, and he used basically the code of military ethics, which is to protect each other against the military by deserting, and I mean, it's just outrageous if he has
actually. What does that have to do? And I'm not disagreeing with you, Grace. I'm really not. I buy everything you just said. But how do you answer the question, which fascinates me? If you got a guy who you have some real reason to believe was a deserter, and I don't think you have to be crazy to believe that here, what are the rules in terms of an obligation to rescue him or free him if you can when he's still a member of the military? I don't know the answer. I'm curious what you think. I don't
either. And I think that you can see that the military itself is in conflict with this, between its own ethics.
Yeah, I mean,
take care of each one of its.
It's really a tricky little thing here.
What do you do if somebody has actually deserted? So they've got to figure that out themselves. Unfortunately, we're.
Well, you're right. I mean, Grace Marie, you're right. There's a conflict here. Look at the soldiers who served with him. Right. They say they would not have done this deal, so they would have left him. A lot of them. And we're coming back, but I do also want to point out, and I want both of you to weigh in on this when we start the next panel segment here in a minute. That the penalty for desertion in times of war can be death. Death is still a lawful sentence for desertion in a time of war. This is according to a high-level officer quoted in U.S. News & World Report this afternoon. I'm not suggesting that it's not in the realm of possibilities for a case like this. There could be significant punishment, significant confinement. So we'll have to wait and see exactly. I also want to touch when we come back with Grace Marie Turner and with Rick Ungar on whether or not Hillary has dug herself into a hole by agreeing right off the bat with this transaction. And did she learn about it when her and Obama had this reported meeting just a day before this all took place? All that coming up. But folks, if you want to weigh in through social media, Twitter, email, and all that kind of good stuff, Facebook, here is how you do it. Watch.